Sometimes the stories we want to tell is not about beating a person. Sometimes we want our protagonist to battle the environment itself. Now, I bet that your first thought in PvE battles is not grass, but that's where you're wrong. Grasslands cover around 30% of Earth's environment, and they are a fascinating biome to include in a fantasy world. Imagine the sun cresting over the horizon, its golden rays painting a canvas of endless grasslands. What if every waving blade of grass actually harbored ancient magic? Or what if the elephant walking over there was actually part of a mighty civilization? Or what if a lion jumps out from behind that tree and eats your face? That is what I want to talk about today, the Savanna grasslands and what it offers the fantasy world builder. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. Grasslands can be broadly divided into two categories: temperate grasslands, which we'll discuss another time, and savanna or tropical grasslands, the topic of today's video, which is brought to you by my epic fantasy series, The Sangwheel Chronicles. More about that at the end of the video. The most famous savanna is probably the African grasslands, and that is the inspiration for my research. So, without further ado, let's plunge into the savanna biome. And first up, we'll appropriately talk about grass. I grew up in Africa, and the thing that I remember most about grass is the length of it. I used to ride ponies when I was young, and the red grass would actually stroke across my feet where they dangled on either side of the pony. African grass is a different kind of thing from what you would think of when you think of grass, especially lawn grass. It is a hardy species that holds the land together, and savannas survive a pendulum swing between extreme weather conditions. One afternoon, drought can starve the land, but the next day, a torrential downpour can threaten to drown everything. Just before I left Africa, we'd been suffering a massive drought for 7 years, and it was incredibly dry. There was even fears that the tap water would run dry. Then, in the space of one afternoon, that drought broke. On that single afternoon, the catchment reservoir dam went from empty to sluice gates open all the way to the top. They say that it was raining an Olympic swimming pool worth of water per second into the dam. The highways of Johannesburg, where I was living at the time, went from cork dry to completely flooded. Cars were quite literally floating away. And that is not the only flood I experienced in Africa. In my childhood, I recollect a flood like that as well. We had a long drought, and then suddenly the rain just came down in buckets, in swimming pool bucket sizes. These extreme swings to me is very typical of Africa's weather, and savanna grass has to be able to survive that. But it's not just the torrential rains they have to survive. There is also fire. All those droughts that I talked about, grass fires start really easily in those conditions and will rip through the savanna in hours. And yet, many savanna grasses don't just survive this, they thrive on it. These grasses are pyrophytic, meaning they need those fires to clear out dead material and encourage new growth. The fire actually returns nutrients to the soil, and this could be a great fantasy element for a world builder. That kind of cycle leans into thematic components of rebirth, death after life, and even the passing down of magic through bloodlines from parents to children. You could bring in legendary creatures inspired by the phoenix, which is reborn from fire, and build that into your mythology and your fantastical elements and your magic system. So there's a lot of potential just in this cycle of fire and grass of the savannas. But there's more to grass than just being able to regrow. The roots of savanna grasses can dig deeper into the earth than the grass is tall, allowing it to tap into water sources far below the surface. And in a fantasy setting, these roots could be channels for underground magic streams, or it could be a means for grass to listen to the whispers of the world. It could hear the world through the earth and pass that wisdom up through its stem to those who have ears to hear it. And of course, grass prevents erosion with this root mass, and that can be a further property of magic where it holds the world together and provides stability that the mage can draw on. But it's not just below the soil that savanna grass has adapted for survival. It is also in their narrow leaves that reduce water loss and through a growth pattern called basal meristems, which is to say they grow from their base rather than their tips, allowing them to survive the grazing and trampling of the herbivores that live in the savanna. This reliance could tie into a magical barrier in your world where you could use the grass to build walls that regrow swiftly after an enemy's attack, or perhaps it could create living armor that heals itself. Maybe with a particular vulnerability to fire. Last point on grass. Though we often picture a homogeneous sea of grass, the savanna actually boasts an impressive array of grass species, and each type has adapted to its microenvironment. There are some that grow low down and some that grow tall, and they are fed on by different animals, and they provide a different role in the overall environment. This creates a mosaic of life that is extremely rich in this keystone plant. In a fantasy world, each of these grasses could hold a different element of magic. Perhaps the mage needs to gather specific grasses in order to weave his spells. And with all of the species of grass available to you, you have a lot to draw on for a magic system. But grass isn't the only plant on the savanna. And so, if you've enjoyed the discussion of grass, hit that thumbs up button, and let's talk about the other flora that exists in this biome. While the rolling sea of grass defines the savanna, it's punctuated by some pretty amazing plants. Take the acacia, for example. These thorny sentinels are evolution's response to the constant threat of herbivory. Thorns are a plant's armor, a botanical barbed wire designed to protect vulnerable leaves and stems from the mouths of hungry grazers. In the realm of fantasy, these thorns could be a natural defense mechanism for sacred groves or enchanted territories, deterring unwelcome visitors from discovering the magic within them. You could weave them into testing ceremonies for young mages, requiring that they pass through the thorns without harm to prove their mastery. Or perhaps these trees could be a part of your religion, and the priests could prove that they have the favor of the gods by opening the pathways through the acacia to the sacred grove. Thorns are a great way to survive the savanna because they also reduce the plant's water requirement. But one plant has found a different way to survive, and that's the mighty baobab, the grand elder of the savanna. Baobabs have a distinctive look that makes them seem like they're planted upside down, with the roots reaching for the sky. This peculiar form has inspired many myths and tales in our world, and in a fantasy world where you have magic, these trees could be a portal between worlds. Their roots could be the anchoring fabric of different realms, and they could be a part of your planar system. And for my thoughts on how to create unseen realms and different planes, check out the information card. But the baobab's trunk is not just for show. It's actually designed to store water. It can store up to 14,000 liters, allowing it to endure those harsh droughts I talked about. These living reservoirs have got enormous potential in a fantasy world. The baobab could be a sacred tree holding the life of the tribe, or the water from the baobab could be a critical component for your magic system. Or you could even go long and build a civilization based on the trees themselves. They could direct the rest of the savanna around their requirements, providing the water other species need. I think that would be a very interesting civilization because the trees, being stationary, would not be an active civilization as our species is. For example, baobabs are pollinated by bats and bush babies, so they would need to create an environment that is conducive to bats and bush babies coming to them, which is a different approach from us, where we take ourselves to our environment and force it to give us food. Their civilization might be a more passive one, as opposed to the active civilizations animals tend to build. I think this would be a really interesting twist on a fantasy civilization. This is especially true because baobabs are extremely long living. They can live for thousands of years, much like the welwitschia plant, which I spoke about in a short, which you can check out in the information card. So, baobabs can stand as silent witnesses to the passing of ages, and their hollow trunks can hold histories and secrets. You could have the baobab be a fantastical element of your world that holds the memories of civilization and that shamans can interact with to learn the wisdom of ages. So, you've got some rich plant options on the savanna. But what about an active civilization? What about the animal life of the savanna? If you've enjoyed this plant discussion, hit that thumbs up button and let's talk about PvE, animal opponents. In 1898, as the British sought to lay down the iron tracks of progress across the Kenyan landscape, two lions emerged from the tall grasses of Tsavo, bringing the construction of the Ugandan railway to a terrifying halt. These were not ordinary lions. They were larger, almost maneless, and they hunted humans not for sport but for survival. Over 9 months, these silent hunters claimed over 130 lives, stalking the labor camps and dragging men from their tents, leaving a legacy that blurred the lines between myth and reality. The local workers named these lions the Ghost and the Darkness because of their uncanny ability to appear and vanish silently with their prey. And that's also what the movie depicting these events was called. In your world, such lions could be more than beasts. Perhaps they are guardians of the land, enacting nature's retribution. Or perhaps they are cursed entities bound to protect a sacred site. There is, of course, also the question of why these lions turned to preying on humans. Some theories suggest a shortage of their usual prey. Others point to the possibility of injury that made hunting wild game difficult. But for your narrative, this could introduce the concept of creatures adapting to an evolving world, maybe even an enchanted one, where the normal rules of nature have been altered by magic or by a curse. The story of these man-eaters has left a mark on Tsavo, turning them into legends. They have become symbols of the wilderness's untamable and unpredictable nature. In a fantasy setting, such creatures could be a source of folk tales, warning of greed and the perils of disturbing sacred lands. A warning to mages not to dig too deep, playing the same thematic role as Tolkien's Balrog does for the dwarves. This kind of story against a non-human, non-sentient kind of enemy allows you to tell stories that really lean into the enduring might of the human spirit and the ability to push through challenges. But maybe you don't want a human civilization, and maybe a tree civilization is a little bit too far out there. How about a civilization based on elephants? Elephants are already known for their strong social bonds and emotional depth, so they could easily form a society that cooperates with each other and thus grow to dominate their environment. Their famed memories could translate into a culture with rich oral traditions that spans generations. You could even tie this into the baobab tree's longevity and have the whole civilization built around memory and how the past creates the future. Even as it stands in our worlds, elephants are a keystone species, and they shape their environment by uprooting trees and creating waterholes. It wouldn't take much expansion to give them tool use. Those trunks are really close to hands already. And as a civilized species, they could be great terraformers, shaping the land to sustain their society and allies. Elephants communicate over long distances using infrasound in our world. You could expand this to a telepathic network, enabling instant communication across the savanna, perhaps even tying it into the grass roots of the savanna that we discussed earlier. So, I would argue if you're looking for a non-human species, skip the lion, leave them as a PvE opponent, and just make the elephant be a civilization. Before we move on from animals, I do want to talk about an often overlooked animal type, the insect. In the case of the savanna, a great insect for the fantasy world builder is the termite. Termites build towering mines that regulate temperature and humidity, an enormous feat of engineering. These mounds are rich in nutrients, making the soil around them fertile. This could be a form of natural alchemy, turning barren earth into life-giving ground. You could also lean into this as a power source for your magic system, where a druid lures termites to enrich the soil of the savanna and encourages new growth. And that will enable you to say the amazing words, "We must destroy his ant farm," which I think would just be glorious to unironically say. But the most interesting thing about termites, in my opinion, is that some species are fungal farmers. Now, I've spoken about zombie ants before, and check out that video on fungus in the information card. But that's not what's going on here. Certain termite species engage in fungi culture, where they cultivate specific fungus as their primary food source. These termites create fungal gardens within their nests, carefully tending their fungal crop. Now, for a fact, fungi are always fun in a fantasy world. And so these termites and their fungi can be in yours. This fungus could be critical to your magic system, but the mage has to maintain his termite farm so that the termites can maintain their fungal farm, giving you a double reason for stealing his ant farm. It's the little things, you know? And if you enjoyed that discussion of animals, hit that thumbs up button and let's talk about magic systems. We've already touched on many fantastical elements, but I'd like to explore two distinct potential magic systems that are intrinsically tied to the vast grasslands and help you explore certain thematic elements in that world. So the first magic system is the Whispering Wilds. In this system, magic is an intimate dialogue with the living savanna. The grass whispers secrets to those who listen, teaching them the language of the wild. Shamans and druids are the interpreters here, capable of understanding the murmurs of growth and the songs of the winds. They can invoke the grass for healing, camouflage, or to create illusions, their powers waxing and waning with the health of the land. Each blade of grass is a potential ally, ready to shield or to expose, a reflection of the savanna's ever-shifting moods. This magic system allows the character to draw on the environment and be supported by it. You could then tell a great story where the environment turns on the character and he is left bereft of power and must repair his connection with the land. This would lean into the might of the savanna as an environmental opponent, while still grounding the tale in magic that draws on the strength of the grasslands. What other themes do you think this magic system could support? Let me know in the comments below. The second magic system I call the Firebrand Covenant. Here, magic is born from the ashes of the Savanna fires, a pact between the forces of destruction and the promise of renewal. Sorcerers draw their power from the scorched earth, channeling the fierce energy of fire into their spells. They can command flames that dance across the savanna, regrow burnt foliage in an instant, or invoke the smouldering spirit of rebirth to heal and restore. Theirs is a magic of stark contrast, devastation and creation, fear and awe, mirroring the duality of fire that both consumes and rejuvenates. This allows you to use the destruction of the savanna as a fearsome opponent, but also as a source of power, allowing you to play with themes of the balance between risk and reward. Do you think this will support any other themes? Let me know in the comments below. In both systems, the grasslands are not just a setting. They are a source of power, an active participant in the magic that flows through your world. The magic is as pervasive as the grass itself and as varied as the life it sustains. Whether whispering with the grass or drawing power from the cycle of fire, mages of the savanna must live in harmony with the land, their strength a direct reflection of the endless horizons and boundless skies. What do you think? What magic system would you build for a savanna biome? Let me know in the comments down below. And let's talk about your savanna. So, if you're building a savanna biome, here are the key components you need to remember. 1. Fire will be critical. The constant rebirth of the grasslands is a key feature of the environment. 2. It really is in the name. You're going to need to focus on grass as the keystone plant, but don't forget about the potential of trees like the baobab and the acacia. 3. The animals are all in a prey-predator cycle, and that gives you the opportunity to tell great PvE stories where humans get caught up in that same cycle. 4. Lean into the strengths of the savanna for your magic systems. Focus on fire, rebirth, and the interconnected nature of plants. And those were my thoughts on creating a savanna biome. Now, I don't currently have much of a savanna in my epic fantasy series, but sales of those books still brought you this video. I've received some good reviews on the books, so I feel confident in saying that if you enjoyed Sanderson, Martin, and Jordan, you'll like my series too, and you can check them out on the link down below. But please don't feel pressured to support the channel financially. You can also show your support just by watching another video. Since you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy my video on creating lake biomes in a fantasy world. Or you could trust the algorithm with its recommendation right over there. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time Worlds, where we build what we need when we need it.